air carrier sector, the aviation sector in 2025. It's been a busy sector. Air Canada has made news in a couple of different ways recently. We're joined now by an expert, Robert Kokonis, founder and managing director of AirTrav. Thanks for coming in, Robert.
Good morning.
Let's talk about, first of all, Air Canada's financial guidance, which it released just a short time ago. Stock sold off in a fairly big way on that news, and what I read was that margins were the concern of investors.
Yes, certainly. If I look at 2024, looking like the bottom line can be relatively strong. There's been some concern that traffic has been lagging growth in capacity, and the yield has been a little bit soft as well, too. I put that over to the sudden surge we had as we came out of the 2022 pandemic. The recovery, we surged so high with traffic and pricing. We've had a little bit of leveling off. I'm not concerned about that at all. There was some concern also in Air Canada's guidance. They're going to hit 36% increase in operating revenue by the year 2028.
Right.
If I look historically back to the year 2010, coming out of the global financial crisis, 36% growth for Air Canada is actually more than doable with the growth, especially internationally. Air Canada is putting more of its eggs in the international basket than the domestic marketplace, so I'm not concerned about that at all. There are some headwinds some analysts have pointed to. For example, labor costs, Air Canada's unit labor costs are trending up for several quarters. The third quarter, they actually started to stabilize, but that, of course, is before the impact of the Air Canada pilot deal.
Do you characterize the Canadian air carrier market as a duopoly between Air Canada and WestJet? Yes?
Yeah, well, no, not entirely. That's what the Competition Bureau came out the door with back in June when they launched a study into domestic competitiveness. But I beg to differ. A carrier like Porter with 71 aircraft now, 10% domestic market share. You've got Transat, you've got Flair trying to grow, trying to acquire more aircraft. So I don't think we're in a duopoly. Maybe it's bordering on that, but I think that the direction of the market is that we're not going to have a duopoly. We have regional carriers from coast to coast. Certainly, yes, with Air Canada's size, even with WestJet, they're big carriers. But again, we've got other pockets of competition in the country.
How much do we know about WestJet these days and its market share and its performance, given that it's now privately held and no longer issues public results?
And by the way, people ask me all the time, when do you expect WestJet to go public again? I keep on saying my standard answer, within 3 years, Onyx will want to have some kind of exit. What we're seeing right now is that WestJet should grow their capacity in 2025 in the mid to upper single digits. Air Canada, by contrast, saying they're going to grow their seat capacity 3 to 5%. I expect to see WestJet somewhere between 5 and 9%, so that's very strong. Their Western pivot, the Western expansion has been very successful, both growing their Calgary intercontinental hub and also their non-hubs like Winnipeg, like Edmonton. As case in point, 2 new routes, Atlanta to Edmonton and Winnipeg, in cooperation with Delta, the joint venture, have been very, very successful. And also WestJets have returned to Eastern Canadian markets flying to Europe like St. John's and Halifax. So I think WestJet is sort of on the right track, and they continue, like all carriers in Canada, to tap into I want to say insatiable, but still continued strong demand across the board for visiting friends and relatives, for leisure and for business traffic. Short-haul business still kind of slow, but overall, all the segments are coming back.
It doesn't take much for these companies to trigger an uproar in Ottawa when they do something. And most recently, it was Air Canada making a move on checked, on carry-on baggage, charging a fee for carry-on baggage if you're using, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you're booking the most least expensive fare, the basic fare without any add-ons. This is fairly commonplace elsewhere in the sector.
It was a pure competitive move. It will certainly add some dollars to Air Canada's bottom line. They were simply matching Porter and WestJet, and Air Canada has every right to do so. And it was just incredulous the way the Minister of Transport and others in Cabinet, they were taking Air Canada to task, which really amounted to a fare attribute on the basic economy fare. We as an industry are saying, as I've said time and time again, government in this country treats aviation as a cash cow. We've got the Canadian Transportation Agency now passing draft new regulations that will actually penalize airlines if there's an event beyond their control, like weather or mechanical issue. They'll still have to come up with hotels and other forms of compensation. I don't know any other industry in the country that has to pay this type of compensation, these type of regulations. And now also the CTA, the Canadian Transportation Agency, is looking at a cost recovery fee to assess to the airlines whether or not they ruled in favor of the airline. And it's crazy. So said again, we can grow the total pie in this country We got to bring that cost down because we need to stimulate the marketplace to get more folks traveling. There's 25% of Canadians, Paul, that never stepped foot on board an airplane. We need to improve that metric.
And why have they not done so? Is cost the barrier?
Cost is a big one. And by the way, as one metric, we're doing some work in India at the moment. And in that country, is more like 70% of the people have never stepped foot in an airplane with 1.4 billion, but still, with a population of 40 million people, we need to stimulate the marketplace with lower fares. Those are the kind of people we need to get off the sofa that can't afford to travel by air. We need to get them traveling by air by bringing down that cost. The starting point with all these taxes, fees, and charges is about $90. So that's the starting point. An airline needs to then layer on top of that its base fare. And so you get into the $150 range. This is to compete with low-cost markets like Europe and Asia, where I'm going to be flying from Dublin to England in a few weeks for about 25 euros. We just can't do that here with our level of cost structure.
You mentioned Porter a short time ago. It operates mainly out of course, exclusively out of this part of the country. And people who follow the news here know that recently at Toronto City Council, and in some of the news media, there's been a resurgence of this talk about the future of the island airport. Should we extend lease agreements and so on? And so, a former top official with the island airport, Mark McQueen, wrote a column in the Globe and Mail saying, look, among the other things that the island airport has delivered is a substantial reduction in airfares because Porter entered the market as a successful player. Do you agree with that?
100%. And also, if I look at what Chicago did years ago, they closed down Meigs Field, downtown airport. They brought in bulldozers overnight.
Yes.
Look, at Billy Bishop is a crown jewel, not just for Toronto, but for Canadians and for folks that are flying into Canada from all over the world. And to get rid of that would be a absolutely colossal mistake. But again, Porter, as I mentioned, now they've got the split operation jets, they've got turboprops, they're doing reasonably well, and they've got a joint venture with Transat, helping Transat as well. Transat's had a bit of a tough year. The last quarter, fourth quarter, was actually reasonably strong, so I'm holding out hope. They're trying to chip away where they can at a long-term debt pile, but that joint venture with Porter is helping to feed the Transat hubs in Toronto and Montreal, and for Porter, it's also helping Porter get into markets like Sun Markets, Transatlantic, that otherwise they wouldn't be involved with.
Robert, thanks a great deal and happy holidays.
Same to you, Paul.
Robert Kokonis is founder and managing director